Haiti borders with the Dominican.
Her name is Serena Buffalino. They call her Mrs. B, and her class always begins with a pledge.
Something local, something global. Haiti.
They're words that carry
Yes.
weight here. Helping yourself means helping others, giving back, here and a world away in Haiti.
And nobody's helping them, except for people like us.
It was through her the class learned of Haiti, of the nearly 1 million orphans, many with no school, no support, no Mrs. B in their lives.
They could not wrap their head around that.
Mrs. B's students are among Toronto's most at risk. Their challenges vary from emotional and behavioral difficulties to learning disabilities. Their trauma so severe they can't function in a regular school setting, and we aren't allowed to show most of their classmates.
For most of the kids, most of society has turned them away. And in this classroom, they're accepted. They're accepted no matter what for who they are.
Take Yolanda. She came here last year so burdened and withdrawn, she would often fall silent, sometimes for days on end. It was, she says, Mrs. B's patience, her quiet encouragement, that saved her.
She actually saves people's lives from dangers.
And perhaps that's why these marginalized kids feel such a kinship with the orphans of Haiti and why they were moved to act.
And so when Yolanda and Jackie and Patrick said, well, Miss B, we need to build them a school.
Build a school, no easy task. They started out raising money. They sold samosas, washed cars, screened movies, you name it. And in just a few months, this little class raised $20,000. So much, it's not just a one-room schoolhouse they can build, but a full 3-story school. And so Mrs. B set off on a journey she'd dreamed of, up into the dusty mountains above Port-au-Prince to a town called Canaan. It's home to thousands of earthquake refugees who live with no running water, no electricity, and no school, until now. The first step was a temporary school. It's up and running. 53 students already in uniform. The permanent school for 250 is growing from its foundations.
It makes me want to cry because she just makes me feel so awed, and I'm very proud of her.
All of this because of a handful of students back in Canada and Mrs. B, the teacher who believed in them.
These are for you.
At another fundraiser, a special tribute to the students, accepted by someone who, without Mrs. B, might not be here.
They believe in me and I believe in them, and together we not only change our lives, but we change the world around us.
For inspiring great things and seeing the potential in everyone, Serena Buffalino is this week's Everyday Hero.
This is the reason why I do what I do, is because of Yolanda and all the...
Good morning. Bonjour. ¿Cómo se va? Ni hao. Hola. Ohio. Bienvenue. Wan Ying. Bienvenidos. Yokoso. And welcome. Welcome to my constant viewers. Thank you. Welcome to new viewers I've met all around the world. And welcome to all of you. To my October birthday people, welcome to another exciting episode of Gem Hunter Stories. My name is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. And each and every week, I get the exciting opportunity and honor and privilege to come into your home to tell you and take you on a journey to places you've never been before, to hear stories you've never heard before. Each week, I get the magnificent opportunity to take you on a mental, physical, and spiritual adventure into the art, science, history, and magic of gemstones, precious metals, and fine jewelry. And because I believe in the transformational powers of stories, because my life has changed as a result of stories, I know and I truly believe that somewhere along the line in this journey that we'll take together, you will hear a story that will change you. You will hear a story that will make you look at the world in a different way. And each and every week, my mission is to create a sound that will resonate inside of you. And my hope is that you take that thing inside of you, the music that's inside of your heart and soul, and use it as a template, as a bridge, as an inception point to help you discover the value of your own stories, of how you resonate with the world, how the world sees you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. This is the last show of October, and as I said before, I am an October baby, and there's many of my friends who were born in this wonderful month of October. So October is the month of actually two gemstones, opal and tourmaline. And because of my travels and ventures, I didn't really get a chance to get into tourmaline. So next week we'll do tourmaline. But today I wanted to kind of continue on with the process of understanding what an opal is. An opal is a beautiful gemstone. An opal, even though it doesn't get all the press that other gemstones get, an opal is a powerful gemstone. Opal actually comes from the Latin word of opus and the Sanskrit santis, which means precious stone. So even back in antiquity, people understood the power of opal. There are 13 different types of opals. Today, we will basically deal with three. We will deal with white precious opal. We will deal with black opal, black precious opal, and we will deal with fire opal. And again, I said that there's 13 different types of opal. But before we get into all the different aspects of opal, I want to go back to something that I've read to you before, that I've said to you before, that I think is very apropos to what we're going to talk about today with opal. And that is going back to my book, As a Man Thinketh. And there's a section in there that says, basically, very soon, so altered has his mind become that the workshop can no longer hold him. It has become so out of harmony with his mentality that it falls out of his life as a garment, is cast aside. And with the growth of opportunity which fit the scope of his expanding powers, he passes out of it forever. That's a quote from Visions and Ideals, which is, again, in this book, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And I say that quote to you because opal is a simple stone. It's simple in its complexity. It's simple in its molecular structure. Opal is a silicate. Opal is actually a is considered a hydrogenous silicon oxide. Sand is silicon oxide, but what makes an opal special is that it's hydrogenous, which means that an opal has a structure of it's actually not even a mineral, it's a mineraloid, meaning that it doesn't have always the structure, a defined structure each and every time. So an opal is a powerful stone because an opal can change. And what opals consists of, the silicon oxide, is that there are submicroscopic beads that are in those little circles, are the submicroscopic beads of silicon with a very thin, again, submicroscopic layer of water. So each opal has somewhere between 5 to 10% of water. And what opal does, what makes an opal really amazing, is that opal usually comes from places where there was an ocean or lake that dried up over thousands and millions of years, like in Australia. There was a huge ocean there in Australia, and that ocean after a while dried up, and that drying up left the spheres of silicon in different configurations, and then yet when the spheres line up in a certain formation, what they do is when the light comes into the opal, that opal, because of the spheres, because of the water, that opal can refract, meaning breaking up all the different components that are built into white light. And the reason why that is important, that is so vitally important, is because when you talk about science, you're not talking about science just here on Earth. You're talking about a concept that is the same no matter where you are in the universe. Light, energy, science is science, whether you're on Earth or Jupiter or Pluto. It all depends on what molecular structures, what are there, and how that molecular structure interacts with the light. So when you're talking about breaking up rays of light, breaking up white light from the sun, that sun is the same sun that hits Pluto, that hits Jupiter, that hits Saturn. Those same concepts are the same concepts that work within inside of you. So when you're talking about a white opal, a white precious opal, you're talking about a substance that not only has a regular formation of silicon that sits on a very thin layer of water, using a substance that is basically the second most ubiquitous substance on Earth, silicon oxide. And that thin layer of water makes it a hydrogenous silicon oxide. And from that comes something beautiful. From that commonality of silicon comes something rare and precious as a white opal, white precious opal. And what I love the most is when you define opal, you're talking about a word called, what you see here is a phenomenon called opalescence. Opalescence, let me give you the scientific version of it. Opalescence is a noun. The milky iridescent appearance of a dense, transparent medium, which is illuminated by the polychromatic visible radiation, which is basically the electron magnetic spectrum, due to local fluctuations in its density and therefore its refractive index. So all that says is that structure that you're looking at, that light, that polychromatic color, that polychromatic light, the white light, that when it enters an opal, it splits up into different rays of light. Therefore, when you own an opal can change colors based on the way the light is hitting it, based on uh, what is the structure of that specific opal, because again, it's an amorphous structure. So that means that what we're looking at in this opal may not be the exact same structure that your opal has, but what's similar is how, and similar and unique is how it interacts with the light. So white precious opal is a powerful stone where what a white opal does, it literally, according to the ancients, what are the things that a white opal does? It is a purification stone. In fact, white precious opal is the light, the color is considered the holy fire. So when you wear a white precious opal, you're literally having the ability to remove negative and positive energy from your life because of the way it refracts with the light. The ancients saw it as a stone of immense power. In fact, there's books that will literally warn you about opals. They're talking about literally that an opal, a white precious opal, is an emotional amplifier, which means that when you wear a white precious opal, anything that you're feeling is amplified. In the old days, the Romans would consider opals was stones of good luck and hope. In France, an opal, when you wore an opal, you had the ability of invisibility, meaning that you could be anything, anywhere, no one would see you, which, because of that invisibility, years later in the 19th century, a lot of people didn't wear opal because they felt like it was a stone of bad luck. Probably because, when you give someone the ability to invisibility, the power of invisibility, what are they going to do with it? So it was considered bad luck. But once the 20th century came about, the opal regained its power, regained its understanding of what an opal does. An opal is so powerful when you combine it with other gemstones, emeralds and lapis. Lapis gives it the ability to, with white, and literally, this is what books say, that lapis, when you combine white precious opal with lapis lazuli, it will literally open up your inner king or queen. That's what it does. When we talk about black precious opal, the difference is still exhibits opalescence, that inner quality, but yet it's on a black or dark gray background. So the colors are more vibrant and you can see the effects of the different colors. And if I was to actually hold this opal in my hand and move it in the light, it would move. It has that play of color. And what that is that light hitting the opal in different angles and therefore refracting the colors that makes it more attractive, makes it more intoxicating. And black, in fact, black precious opal is considered a stone of magic and mystery. There are books that say that a black precious opal is also a powerful magnet of not only of someone's thoughts, but someone's intentions. So when you wear black precious opal, whatever you think about, as a man thinketh, very soon so altered has his mind become. So when you wear black precious opal, it intensifies your intentions. In fact, there are books that warn you, the old saying, be careful what you wish for, you may get it. That comes about even more so when you wear black precious opal. The next stone that we're going to talk about is the fire opal. Now, the fire opal doesn't have, look at it. A fire opal Again, this is the light hitting the opal. Now, a fire opal does not have water in it. Well, it does have water, but it's a different configuration. It doesn't have that opalescence. So what you're seeing is an even purer form of the way the light hits the gemstone, the way it's broken up. And this is a fire opal coming. You can see the matrix. You can see on the outside the matrix of it. You can see the basically the bowl, the matrix stone, the stone that the opal that was covering the opal. And when you open it up, this is what you see. And that structure, that breaking up the light into its various colors. And again, as I said in previous shows, and as we learned as a child, that all colors come from white light. And in an opal, that white light, that changing of color is called fire. It's called fire. Because that is the energy that you get from opal, that it radiates, that it vibrates on a different level, and it's called fire. That's what I do. When I am in different countries, workshops, what I do is I'm a teacher, and my whole responsibility is to create fire, as I say in the opening of my show, to create a sound. A lot of people know this, but let me say it publicly. What I do, other than or in concert with appraising gemstones, I'm a teacher. I teach science and I teach history. And what my job is to create that fire, to literally look at each and every student and figure out what type of gemstone they are. So the Gem Hunter, Gemological Appraisals and Storytelling Services, I have basically a sub-business on that called Professor Barry's Science Emporium. And in that, and usually I do it online. Before the pandemic, I would do it face-to-face. But my online teaching, what I do is I inspire young men and women, boys and girls, to like science and history. And I don't do it in a way that's normally done in the classroom setting. So let me give you a little bit background. I became a teacher, and literally I say became a teacher, back in 2011. 2011, Obama was president. They was doing a State of the Union address. I remember sitting in my living room, listening to President Obama. And at that time, there was this huge push for more African-American men to get into the school system, to teach science, especially because science is so vitally important. And I'll never forget where President Obama looked into the screen. And when he was asking for, basically calling for African-American men who had backgrounds in science to teach, I remember looking at the screen and it seemed like he was looking directly at me. Remember the old 1940 ads like "We want you," and it was Uncle Sam pointing to you saying, "We want you to join." Well, that was the effect that President Obama looking into the screen had on me. I literally remember him looking at the screen, President Obama looking through the television camera at me. And I remember looking around, and in my head, I could hear him saying, "You, I'm talking about you." And that's when I began to think. And of course, by 2012, I had competed in the international speech contest, Toastmasters, went to the world champion of public speaking. And someone from Northwestern University heard that what I did, that I competed. And they asked me, could I take storytelling into the school system? And I was like, yeah, I can do that. So I enrolled, I became a part of that program. It's called the New Teach program, where you took people from the outside, people who had various backgrounds, and brought them into the school system. And for 10 wonderful years, I had the opportunity into training to work with kids children, mostly middle school, in the Chicago public school system. Now, we all know what's going on, especially if you live in Chicago, all the things going on and challenges happening in the school system. And sure, I can say all kinds of things about Chicago public school system, but what I want you to understand, what I got out of it, that it was a wonderful experience. It was a wonderful training to learn how to speak to children. And one of the things that I began to develop and began to understand with kids is that kids, especially learning science, a lot of children don't like science. Science is marginalized in the school system. You have reading, you have math. In fact, as most CPS teachers, they're probably in school right now are preparing, but most teachers or CPS teachers or teachers anywhere will understand that school systems will give you certain times. Like you have to do 1 hour of math, 1 hour of science, and 1 hour of reading, and then 1 hour of science. And what happens is, let's say this box is all 3 levels. And what happens is, because there's so much concentration on reading and so much concentration on math, and not saying that's not important, it's vitally important, but science also oftentimes get pushed to the side. So here we have children in the 21st century that need science. Every job, everything is science. And yet science is just pushed aside. And the reason why it's pushed aside, the reason why so many children don't like science is because, in my opinion, that there's no connection. Nobody cares about photosynthesis. They don't. There's adults listening to this program. If I was to ask you what photosynthesis was, you're like, I don't know, it has something to do with plants. If I was to ask you, in fact, I just taught this class the other day, what is cellular respiration? Cellular respiration. So many people wouldn't understand it and wouldn't know what it does or the importance of it. And yet everything we do in our lives, not just as human beings, but as living species on the planet Earth, have to go through cellular respiration, because cellular respiration is what allows every cell of your body to function. So the challenge with school and with kids is that they learn cellular respiration, they learn science is just something that they have to do versus something that they do all the time. So let me give this shameless plug that when children come to me, if you have a child, boy or girl, that does not like science, bring them to me. Send me an email on gemhunterstories@gmail.com and allow me to work with your child. Because the reason why your child, and I don't even know who your child is. Notice, I don't know who's on watching this show today. I don't know what child you're talking about, but I guarantee that if your child does not like science, after working with me, they will begin to like science. After working with me for a while, they will begin to love science. And how can I say that? Because it's all about stories. See, remember way back I told you that one of the most important things that you could ever do in your life is to tell a story. Now, let me show you how that relates to learning science, learning history. I had a child once, one of my first students, Jody L. Jody L was a very good-looking Puerto Rican young man. Tall, he looked like, if you're into football, he looked like Ronaldo, just handsome. You could just tell this guy was the kind of kid that just walked in the room and all the girls just said, oh, and he was an excellent soccer player. But I didn't know all this. All I know is, wow, he's a good looking kid. And Jody L came to me and said, from day one, didn't know me from a can of paint. All he knew was my name was Mr. Mixon. And he said, Mr. Mixon, I just want to tell you something. I said, what's that? He said, I don't like science. I said, okay. Again, kids, those of you who have kids, parents, teachers, kids are always trying to test you. So he comes out with just full frontal attack. I don't believe in science. And I want to give you the background of what he said. My room, when I was going through Northwestern, they make you do a kind of portfolio, and you had to create an essay of what your room looked like. And in my room, I wanted my children, my students, to walk into not just study science, but to walk into science, where science was on the walls and on the ceilings and on the floor. So in my classroom, I had posters, I had models, I had different experiments, I had everything. My science classroom was amazing. There were days when I came home and I looked at my condo, I'm like, man, my classroom looked better than my condo, because I wanted the kids to experience science. So when Jodielle told me, and I had pictures of Madame Marie Curie and my boy Galileo and the first man on the moon, Buzz Aldrin, and I had Maleficent, the movie from Disney movie, and I had the Avengers, and I had them all up there. I had George Washington Carver, I had everybody up there on the wall. And he looked at me and said, Mr. Mixon, all these guys, they're fake. Einstein, all these guys are fake. Of course, trying to, push my buttons. And I looked at him and I said, okay. And he was shocked. He was like, you don't have anything to say? I said, no. A friend of mine loves the way I go, I didn't. I said, what? Couple days later, I just let him go. And a couple days later, I said, what do you like, Jodielle? He said, I like soccer or football. And I said, okay. I said, I got you. He said, what do you mean I got you? He said, I got you. And before I tell you the transformation of Jodielle, I'm going to take this commercial break and give you a chance to think about all the kids that don't like science, because when I tell you why Jodielle transformed, you're going to understand why your child does not like science. I'll see you on the side. All right, we're back. Wanted to give you a little eye candy before we talk about this. Is the Cartier Dragon. This is a platinum and diamond brooch. As you can see, it has a emerald eyes, a beautiful emerald ball in its claws, and in its tail is an awesome Australian black opal. And you can see the different play of colors in a platinum setting. This is called the Cartier Dragon brooch. So back to Jodielle. So I told Jodielle, I said, I got you. He said, what do you mean? I said, you'll see. A few days later, Jodielle, again, he loved soccer. He thought he was going to just be, he didn't want to hear about science. He really didn't want to hear about school, but he didn't want to hear about science because it didn't speak to him. It wasn't something that he needed to play soccer. So one day I saw Jodielle, he would practice every day before school. This is how serious he was. And he was out there he really was a good player. And I saw him practicing kicking goals. And I walked up to Jodielle and I said to him, Jodielle, I can do that. And of course, Jodielle looking at me up, you know how kids look at you when they realize that you're just so old that they just think that you're crepitude. And he said, no, you can't, Mr. Mixon. I said, yeah, I can. He said, no, you can't. I said, Jodielle, all you have to do, and of course I exaggerate. I said, all you have to do is just kick the ball, right? And I was just like, just kick the ball. He says, no, Mr. Mixon, no. He said, you got to plant your foot. You got to do this. And I said, Jodiel, you know what you're talking about? I said, you're talking about physics, but let me not say that because you don't believe in that. One day, Jodiel, a few weeks later, Jodiel had this pair of $200-300 Nike football cleats, soccer cleats. You know, I don't know why a kid in a small, low income school had $300 shoes on, but he did. And he's out there and everybody's looking at his shoes, beautiful shoes. And I said, just looked at him. I walked up to the crowd and just said, He said, what? You like my shoes? I said, yeah, I like your shoes, Jodiel, but you could have went to Walmart and got $2.99 slippers and do the same thing. He just looked at me with disgust like, oh, Mr. Mixon, I thought you knew something. I said, what do you mean? He said, how am I supposed to kick the ball? How am I supposed to get the grip? How am I supposed to be able to angle the ball into the net? And I said, oh, Jodiel, you know what you're talking about? I said, this is the bad word, but let me say it to you. Please don't tell your mother. He said, what? I said, you're talking about physics. You're talking about friction. In the day that I began to understand the transformational power of stories was the day that Jodiel, sitting way in the back of the classroom, Jodiel was the kind of kid that had his hood on his head, practically sleeping. And I was like, okay, whatever, Jodiel. And he was going to fail his science project because he told me he wasn't going to do it. And I said, Jodiel, why don't you just pick somebody? He picked Mendeleev. Mendeleev was the guy who created the periodic table, all the elements. And one day I was teaching a class to the rest of the class who were teaching about Mendeleev. And all of a sudden, Jodiel raised his hand way in the back of the room. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, wait a minute. This is a magical day. Jodiel actually has a question. And he starts talking about Mendeleev. And I was like, wow, Jodiel, that's excellent. And then he put his head back over and laid back down. And we continue on. And I was talking about how Mendeleev, he didn't receive a Nobel Prize because of his arrogance, because he knew, like Galileo, he knew he was a genius and he let everybody know that. And I started going into why. And Jodiel raised his hand again and I couldn't believe it. I was like, Jodiel, twice in one semester, you're raising your hand? And Jodiel starts talking about Mendeleev. He starts talking about who Mendeleev was, who he met, how he began to see the world in terms of molecular structures and atomic numbers and things of this. And he came, unbeknownst to him, he comes to the front of the classroom and starts talking to the whole entire class about Dmitri Mendeleev. And at the end of his dissertation, I said, Jodiel, you have an A. He says, what do you mean I didn't do the project? I said, oh, Jodiel, I don't know what it was that inspired you to finally open up the book to read about Mendeleev, but you got it. You told the whole story of Mendeleev. And that's when I began to understand that it's the story that kids are not getting. That's what I teach. The beauty of science, especially, the beauty of science is that science is everything. Sure, I can sit here and read this wonderful description of opulescence and tell you, and all this other kind of stuff. But what people really want to hear, what people remember is the story. There is nothing that your child can do or is doing that is not science. And the only thing that you have to do is link it up to what their stories are. And once you tell them that story, they're changed, because you're no longer teaching them something that they want to hear. Go back to Jodiel. I saw Jodiel it's been a while now. 5 years ago, I saw Jodiel standing on the bus stop. I was walking down the street. Jodiel was on the bus stop. And I saw him. I said, oh, Jodiel, hey, it's good to see you. We hugged and everything else. And I said, Jodiel, how's soccer? He said, oh, Mr. Mixon, I don't play that anymore, which was a shock. I mean, Jodiel Soccer was religion. You know, God, Jesus, soccer to Jodiel. Jodiel said, Mr. Mix, I don't do that anymore. I said, what do you do? What do you mean? You love soccer. There was me and you had arguments about how you didn't want to learn soccer. He said, I said, what do you do? He says, Mr. Mixon, I am part of a program with MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And if you're a scientist, you might as well be talking about Mecca. You might as well be talking about the Vatican. That's when you say MIT as a scientist, you hear, oh. He was involved in a program with MIT in high school, working with science, I think he was really into physics and computer technology. And I remember a tear coming to my eye. And I told him right then and there, Jodiel, this is exactly why I became a teacher. And that's what he does. So what I do as a gem hunter, as a gemological storyteller, I take science and tell a story. When I started, I was a regular teacher, then I dropped to being a cadre, or basically like a substitute teacher, so I can make all these travels around the world. This is when the University of Paris had hired me to bring storytelling to France. And so I dropped my level so I can have that opportunity to travel. And one of the things that I realized was that how people they don't see the world. If you get people to see the world in terms of stories, you have roped them in. I would have kids when I would come back as a sub, and those of you who have been substitute teachers or been kids who have terrorized substitute teachers, the substitute is normally the guy that nobody pays, or a woman that nobody pays attention to. So I would start my classes out by saying, hold on, guys, I give you a challenge. If you can come up with 3 things that does not need science, 3 things that you can do in your life that does not require science, I will give you an A for today. And of course, they're looking at me like, what? And I'm like, serious. They're like, you're lying. I'm like, no, I'm serious. I will give you an A for today. So they take out their books and they start. And first they just wanted to raise their hands. Like, no, you have to write it down. Write down 3 things that you can do in your life when you grow up that does not need science. And they would tell dog catcher, this, that. And eventually, one kid would raise their hand and go, Mr. Mixon, I know the answer. I said, what's the answer? Everything is science. Everything is science. The whole purpose of this show is to show that there is a link. There is a relationship between science and gemstones, between people and gemstones, between women and gemstones. When you're talking about something like anybody who has been in love with a woman has experienced a play of color. That is talking to the guys now. That is when you see a woman that's just beautiful to your eyes. She's beautiful in not just the fact that she's standing there and has 2 arms and 2 legs and she's wearing whatever. She's beautiful because of the way the light hits her, the way she interacts with the light. And that's the reason why I have a problem, and Barbara and I talk about this all the time, whereas what happened to romance? Because when you begin to understand the thing that you loved about this gemstone is the same things that you loved about the person that you love, that woman, that man that you love, you see the similarities. This is an opal. This is an opal without any type of, where the molecular structure, still the silicon oxide, the hydrous silicon oxide is still there, but it's just in more of a transparent form. So even though there is no color, such as like this or like this is still equally beautiful. So just like a gemstone can be created in different manifestations, what I teach to children is that the thing that they want to do in their life is science. That don't look at it as you need to learn this, that H2O was boring. There's no big deal. Two hydrogens and one oxygen. Okay. But when you begin to understand that two hydrogens and one oxygen, that angle, the bottom of my hand represents the oxygen, the two hydrogens are here, and that distance between the two hydrogens, 1.7 angstroms, is the reason why we have life on Earth. Of course, God put it there. Okay. As a scientist, as I told one of my kids, they were like, "Do you believe in science, God, Mr. Mixon?" Of course I do. All I do as a scientist explain the things in the best way I can, explain the things that God can do. I don't know how it came about, but water, the molecular structure of water, is what makes life on Earth possible, because water is the only substance. Homework assignment, write this down. Water is the only substance on Earth that can be in a solid form, a liquid form, and a gas form at the same time. So when a child tells me I like swimming, all I have to do is tell them the molecular structure of water and how water works. Then I got them. If your child tells me, here's another story. I worked with I dated a woman once who had a son who hated science, thought science was terrible, but he loved video games. He loved video games. And I'm playing a game with him. I don't know, he's playing Call of Duty. This is the boy that joined the Marine Corps because of the stories I told him. So this is before he really got into it. And he's playing Call of Duty. He lets me play, and I'm holding the controller in my hand. And I said, "Gerald, what do I do?" He says, "Push the button." And I said, "What is the button supposed to do?" He says, "He's going to make the man move." Now, I was sitting literally like 6 feet away from his monitor, his television screen. And I said, "How is that possible?" He says, "What do you mean?" Looking at me like, "Are you just stupid or what?" And I said, "How is it possible that I'm holding this controller and you want something to work way over there?" He says, "That's how it works." I said, "But where's the cords?" Of course, I always play up the fact that I'm 1,000 years old to them, so I don't know. So in me saying I don't know, they teach me. And then he starts to go on to this whole dissertation about the electrical forces that go on into, he didn't say it like that, but what he was talking about was the electrical forces that go on in the controller. Basically, is transmitted to a box that speaks to the television, and that's how it works. And I said, "Gerald, do you know what you're talking about?" I said, "You're talking about physics. What you do every day, you're spending hours of doing science." And he just looked at me. He says, "No, I don't." I said, "Well, how else do you explain it? How else do you explain the thing that you played hours a day? And then at the same time, you tell me you don't like science, really?" And from that moment on, he began to look at science and study science in a different way. So my purpose today is to not only let you know what I do when I'm in France. A lot of people ask, "What do you do when you're in France?" What I do is I teach kids. In this trip, I taught kids. Those little boys that you saw on the screen. And again, thank you to Olivia and Yanni. Yanni. I've gotten so many emails from women that told me, "When can I bring Yanni back on?" Because they love Yanni. So yeah, Yanni is, I don't know. No, he'll be back on. Yanni, David, and Ryan. What I do is I teach them how to look at the world in a different way. And I do that by stories. The reason why I have been successful as a teacher, in fact, the reason why I left CPS was because I began to realize that as an artist, as a storyteller, I didn't need someone to kind of control the story, to control the power of me being able to tell stories. And the way science is taught in many cases, that it's just taught in this compartmentalized way where science is, again, everything. Everything can go back to science. So when you teach the children the art, science, history, and magic of that subject matter, then they're changed. When you begin to see opal not just as a beautiful stone that you go, wow, that's nice, but when you begin to see opal as a representation of who you are, how you took something, whoever you are unique. And I'm not saying that just in the kumbaya way, we're all different. Yes, we are, but let's talk about it from a scientific point of view. You, whoever's watching this show right now, you are different. Yes, are you a human being? Yes, you are. Are you a male? Are you a female? Did you identify with? What do you identify? You are different. And the thing that makes you different is not just the outside, not just who you are as a person, but the difference is how you interact with the light. What is your play of color? As I said, that there are 13 different varieties of opal. There's fire opal. At least there's common opal. Okay, in common opal, you have blue opal, you have pink opal, you have brown, you have black opal. Then you have your white precious opal, which is what this is, with its opalescence, that milky, transparent, where the play of color. You have white precious opal. Then you have black precious opal that sits on that black matrix or gray matrix background. And again, the way the light hits those beads, and it creates a spectacular play of color, that fire. Then you have fire opals. Many of you watching this program right now know that this is you. This is you. This is the fire. When you walk into the room, ladies, when you get dressed on that special day occasion, this is what you are going for. That fire, that effect that when you walk into the room, people feel your energy, that you have created a sound that no one has ever heard, that no one's ever saw. So those of us who are born in October, we understand that we are amorphous entities, that we can change who we are. We can become the person that we've always wanted to be. So next week, we will continue on with opal and go on to tourmaline, which is the other gemstone of October. We will talk about the power, the spiritual and metaphysical aspects of these gemstones. But until then, my name is Barry B. Mixon, and I am a gemological storyteller. And as I ask you each week to do, take a moment in your day, take a moment in your week, and begin to consider the value of your own stories. Until then, au revoir.